Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. It's kind of wild when you think about it, just how much of our lives are shaped by things we don't even really notice.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's like
Hey,
we're on autopilot so much of the time.
exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. Influence. That often invisible force that's kind of nudging us, guiding us,
hmm
and ultimately playing a huge role in who we become.
Right. And it's not always a forceful thing either. What's so interesting, at least from what I gathered from our AI source, an AI perspective on human influence, a comprehensive analysis, is that influence is more about this capacity to, well, produce an effect indirectly.
Indirectly, huh? So it's not like someone's twisting your arm.
No, not at all. It's much more subtle than that. It's about shaping your actions, even your reactions, without you necessarily feeling like, pressured or anything.
I see. So you're saying it's kind of sneaky.
In a way, yes. It's like this undercurrent that's always there, influencing us in ways we might not even realize. And the really fascinating thing is that this analysis shows just how pervasive it's been throughout human history.
So it's not just a modern thing.
No, not at all. It's affected everyone, no matter their background or where they lived, since, well, basically forever. It's a fundamental part of being human. I mean, all of you listening have been dealing with this from day one.
Wow, that's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
Mm.
So in this deep dive, we're going to unpack all the different ways this force, this influence, is at play in our lives, right?
That's the plan. And what's really cool about this AI analysis is that it takes this really broad view. It looks at how influence touches everything, from your biology and psychology to the culture you're immersed in and the physical environment you're living in. And it even shows how all of this stuff affects you differently across different stages of your life.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. So to help everyone listening follow along, I think it would be helpful to lay out the different categories of influence that the analysis identifies. That way, everyone will have a framework.
Definitely. Makes sense. So the first big category we'll look at is biological influences, and this focuses on two major areas: the food you eat and your overall health.
Okay, food. That makes sense. We all know that what we eat fuels our bodies. But this analysis suggests it goes much deeper than that. It seems like food has a huge impact on mental health, too.
It really does. And on how your brain functions as well. We're talking mood, how you interact with others, even, and this might surprise you, but there are links to things like aggressive behavior.
Or really? Food can influence aggression.
That's what the research suggests. There's a lot of fascinating stuff about the connection between diet and our mental and emotional well-being. For example, think about this. A varied diet provides the essential building blocks your brain needs to function optimally and to regulate emotions. You don't have those building blocks. Well, things can start to go a bit haywire.
Interesting. So like our brain needs its own special diet.
You could say that. And it even gets more complex than that. The analysis talks about this thing called the gut-brain axis. Have you heard of that?
I don't think so.
So basically, the microbes in your digestive system, they actually communicate with your brain.
Whoa, hold on. My gut is talking to my brain.
Well, not literally talking, but you get the idea. There are these intricate connections between what's going on in your gut and your brain function. And it's not just mood either. It can affect decision-making and even your thought processes. Some studies have even shown that a lack of certain types of gut bacteria can lead to increased anxiety.
No way. Seriously?
Yeah.
So if my gut bacteria is messed up, I could be more anxious? That's kind of scary.
It highlights just how complex and interconnected our bodies are, and it underscores the importance of a diverse, healthy diet. And you know what? Even something as simple as keeping your blood sugar stable can make a huge difference.
Oh, tell me about it. I get super hangry if I skip a meal.
Exactly. It's a real thing. When your blood sugar dips, your mood and concentration can take a nosedive. So those regular meals and snacks, they're not just about keeping your stomach from rumbling. They're about keeping your brain happy and functioning well, too.
This is making me really rethink my snack choices. So what kinds of things should we be eating to keep our brains in tip-top shape?
Well, the analysis specifically mentions a bunch of key nutrients that are crucial for optimal brain function. Things like iron, zinc, magnesium.
Okay, those sound familiar, like from multivitamins.
Exactly. And then there's vitamin D, all the B vitamins, and of course, omega-3 fatty acids. Those are the superstars for brain health.
Got it. Got to make sure we're getting enough of those. So we've talked about food, but this category was about biological influences in general, right?
Right. So beyond just your diet, your overall health plays a huge role too. We're talking everything from exercise to whether or not you use substances, even how well you follow medical advice.
So it's really about the big picture of your health.
Exactly. And the analysis really emphasizes how all these different aspects of your health impact your overall well-being. If you're taking care of your physical health, chances are your mental health will benefit too, and vice versa.
It's like this positive feedback loop, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Positive health behaviors are strongly linked to both physical and mental well-being. But on the flip side, if your health is suffering, it can really drag down your mood and make things feel way harder.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you know what? You can't really talk about health without talking about stress.
Oh, absolutely. The analysis makes it clear. Stress is a major player here. It affects us on so many levels, physically, mentally, emotionally, and it can really mess with your behavior too. And if you don't manage it well, it can lead to more serious health problems down the road.
Stress is definitely something we all struggle with these days. It feels like it's everywhere. But before we move on from the biological stuff, we should probably mention the foundational biological elements too.
Right, like our genetics, hormones, and those neurotransmitters, the little chemical messengers in our brains.
It's easy to forget that these things are working behind the scenes too, influencing how we respond to everything else.
For sure. The analysis points out that these biological factors set the stage for how we react to all the other influences that come our way. They're like the base layer, the foundation.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've covered the biological influences. What's up next?
Well, now it's time to step into the social realm. This is all about how the people around us shape who we are. And it starts, of course, with family.
Ah, yes. Family. I think everyone knows that our families have a huge impact on us. But this analysis really highlights just how crucial those early relationships are. They influence everything, our viewpoints, our values, our emotional responses, even how we see ourselves.
It's true. And those early influences can really stick with us throughout our lives. You know, whether those influences are positive or negative, they leave a lasting impression. And the analysis even specifically mentions that family support is super important for our self-esteem and our overall sense of well-being.
Yeah. If you feel supported and loved by your family, it can give you a real sense of security and confidence to go out into the world. But what about friends? How do they fit into all of this?
Well, friends offer companionship and emotional support, which is probably not surprising. But the analysis also points out that friends can influence our health behaviors too. If your close friends are into fitness and eating healthy, you might be more likely to adopt those habits too just by being around them.
It's true. I've definitely noticed that with my own friends. So we kind of rub off on each other, huh?
Exactly. Social proximity has a powerful effect on us. And it's not just about the quantity of friends you have either. The analysis emphasizes that the quality of those relationships is what really matters.
So a few close, genuine friends are more valuable than a ton of casual acquaintances.
Exactly. Quality over quantity, definitely. And it's not just our inner circle that influences us. The analysis also talks about the impact of our neighbors and even those random people we encounter in public.
It's amazing to think that even those fleeting interactions can shape us, right?
It's true. They can subtly influence our daily behaviors and the social norms we follow without us even realizing it. It's about that sense of belonging to a community and picking up on the unspoken rules of how people interact.
I've never thought about it like that before. It's like we're constantly reading the social cues around us and adjusting our behavior to fit in.
You got it. And the analysis reminds us that social interaction in general is a fundamental human need. It's not just about being polite, it actually benefits us in all sorts of ways. It can improve memory, encourage altruism, make us more self-aware, and you know what? On an evolutionary level, being social increases our chances of survival.
That's kind of a mind-blowing thought, that even a quick chat with the barista at the coffee shop or waving to your neighbor could actually be helping you survive.
It's about cooperation and social learning. We learn from each other, we help each other out, and that strengthens the group as a whole. And speaking of social dynamics, we can't forget about gossip.
Oh, gossip. I know it gets bad rap, but it's definitely a force to be reckoned with.
It is. The analysis actually suggests that gossip can function as a form of influence within social groups.
Really? So how does that work?
Well, it's all about information sharing. Gossip spreads information, particularly about people's reputations and behaviors, and this can influence how people within that group act and whether they are seen as trustworthy or not. It's a way of regulating behavior within a group.
It's like social policing, almost.
Whoa.
Interesting. Okay, so we've covered biological influences and social influences. What's next on our influence adventure?
Now it's time to explore the realm of culture. And this section of the analysis kicks off with ideologies and religions.
Those are big topics, and they definitely have a huge impact on people's lives.
Absolutely. They often provide a sense of meaning and order to the world. They offer moral guidance, and they can really shape how people behave and view the world. They can even affect a person's sense of well-being and their attitudes towards things like risk. Think about it. Your belief system really colors how you see everything around you.
It's true. Your beliefs can really shape your whole outlook on life. So those ideologies and religions, they provide a framework for understanding your place in the universe. And then there's the broader concept of culture. How does the analysis define culture in terms of its influence?
Well, it describes culture as basically the shared beliefs, values, traditions, and social norms of a group, the stuff that binds people together. And it emphasizes how deeply culture shapes every aspect of our experience. We're talking how we see the world, how we interpret events, our behavior, even our cognitive processes.
Like culture is the operating system for society, right? It programs how we think and act.
That's a great way to put it. It dictates how we express our emotions, how we handle conflicts, even what motivates us. And one key distinction the analysis highlights is the difference between individualistic and collectivistic cultures.
Right, that's a big one.
It is. In individualistic cultures, the focus is on personal autonomy, achievement, and self-reliance. It's all about me. But in collectivist cultures, the emphasis is on group harmony, the needs of the collective, social bonds. It's about we.
So depending on your cultural background, you might view yourself and your role in the world very differently. That's fascinating. So we've explored how what we eat, who we hang out with, and what we believe in shapes us. What's next?
Well, now it's time to consider the influence of our environment. And this category starts with, believe it or not, geography.
Geography. Like mountains and rivers. How can that influence us?
Well, think about it. Climate, topography, the availability of resources, they all influence how societies develop and how we live. And these factors also shape cultural practices that have evolved over time in response to those specific environmental conditions.
You're saying that people living in a harsh desert environment might develop different ways of surviving and interacting compared to people living in a lush rainforest.
Exactly. And the analysis even mentions that some researchers have observed regional variations in personality traits and social behaviors, which they think might be linked to these long-term environmental factors.
So where you live can actually shape who you are. That's wild. And it's not just about the broad geographic context, right? Our immediate surroundings also play a role.
You got it. The analysis points to the impact of both the natural environment and the built environment. Things like access to green spaces, the safety of our neighborhoods, even the levels of pollution in our surroundings. All of that can influence our health behaviors, child development, and our overall well-being.
So having a park nearby isn't just nice, it can actually make you healthier.
Yeah.
And conversely, living in a polluted area can have a negative impact on your health.
Precisely. Our environment really shapes our choices and our well-being in so many ways. Okay. Ready for the next category?
Hit me with it. What else is shaping us?
Now we're moving into the realm of information. And this one is super relevant for all of us in today's world. It's the influence of news and media.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a big one these days. With social media and the 24/7 news cycle, it's like we're constantly bombarded with information.
You said it. And the analysis points out that the news sources we choose to consume play a major role in how we understand the world, which of course can then affect our emotions, beliefs, and ultimately our actions.
It's like news and media are shaping our reality.
In a way, yes. And the analysis even mentions a potential downside to all this information overload and anxiety. If we're not careful, we can get overwhelmed and stressed out by the constant stream of news and updates.
It's like our brains can only process so much information at once, so it's a balancing act for us.
Yeah.
Staying informed without getting totally overwhelmed.
Exactly. Now, moving on from the news, let's talk fashion.
Yeah.
You might not think of it as a major influence, but the analysis suggests otherwise.
Fashion, really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The analysis presents fashion as a powerful form of self-expression and communication. And it can influence our mood, our confidence, even how we interact with others.
Interesting. I've definitely noticed that when I wear certain clothes, I feel more confident. But is there science to back this up?
You bet. The analysis even brings up this idea of enclothed cognition, which suggests that what we wear can actually affect our psychological processes and how we see ourselves. Some studies have shown that if you wear clothes associated with competence, you might actually perform better on tasks. It's like your clothes are sending signals to your brain.
So if I want to ace that presentation, maybe I should dress the part.
It's certainly worth considering. It's fascinating how much our clothes can impact our state of mind. Okay, moving right along. How about sports and games?
Oh, sports. Those are a big part of many people's lives.
Absolutely. And the analysis highlights their benefits for physical health, which isn't a surprise. But it also points out that sports and games can help us develop important social skills, like teamwork and cooperation.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Learning to work together towards a common goal is huge.
It is. And on top of that, sports can teach us how to regulate our emotions. We learn to handle winning and losing gracefully, which are valuable life skills.
Those are lessons that go way beyond the playing field. So sports teach us about teamwork, resilience, how to handle pressure. It's like a crash course in life skills.
Oh.
Okay, last but not least, in the informational category, we have science. How does science influence us?
Well, the analysis points out that scientific insights into human behavior are increasingly used to guide public opinion and even influence our individual choices in areas like health, education, and technology. Think about all the research on the benefits of exercise or the potential impacts of social media. Those findings can really shape how we think about these issues and the choices we make in our own lives.
That's so true. Science is always giving us new information and perspectives, which then influences how we understand ourselves and the world. And speaking of how we understand ourselves, the analysis makes a point about how these different categories of influence can play out differently depending on our age.
Right. As we move through different stages of life, the relative impact and prominence of these influences can shift. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. Like take infancy, for example. At that stage, the biological influences are paramount. Nutrition from breastfeeding is crucial, and so is that early bonding with caregivers. And even culturally, babies are being exposed to the specific caregiving practices of their culture.
So in those early years, it's all about the basics. Food, love, and the cultural blueprint you're born into. Makes sense. What about childhood? How do things change then?
Well, social circles expand as kids start interacting more with friends and in school. Those peer relationships become increasingly important. And at the same time, informational and cultural influences start to take hold more strongly as they are exposed to media, broader societal norms, and the values of their community.
And then comes adolescence.
Yeah.
I think we all remember that being a time of major shifts in terms of who and what influenced us.
Oh yeah, adolescence is a whole other ballgame. Peer influence becomes super intense, and that's amplified even more by social media these days. It's also a critical period for identity formation, figuring out who you are in terms of your ethnicity, gender identity, and religious or spiritual beliefs, all of which are heavily shaped by the social and cultural forces around you.
It's a time of huge change and exploration, and a lot of pressure, too. What about adulthood? What are the dominant influences for people during those years?
Well, the analysis suggests that work, family responsibilities, and health concerns tend to take center stage. And of course, maintaining social connections, both personal and professional, is still crucial. Cultural beliefs continue to shape experiences too, even things like career choices. The analysis gives the example of people in collectivist cultures often choosing careers based on what's best for their family's needs and expectations, even if it's not what they personally want.
That's a great example of how those cultural values we talked about earlier can play out in real life. So as we get older, it's more about navigating the responsibilities of work and family and taking care of ourselves. And finally, what about old age? How do things shift in those later years?
Well, social connections remain super important for maintaining cognitive function and even promoting longevity. The physical environment becomes more crucial too, particularly things that support mobility, independence, and safety. And then societal and cultural attitudes towards aging can have a big impact on how older people experience this stage of life. For example, the analysis mentions that regular social interaction is really beneficial for cognitive function in older adults.
It's almost like we come full circle.
Yeah.
The importance of connection and belonging is a thread that runs throughout our entire lives. And I love how the analysis includes this table with specific examples of how all these different influences manifest in different life stages.
Oh yeah, that table is really helpful. It shows how a sugary diet in childhood can mess with concentration, how secure attachment in infancy can lead to more trusting relationships later on, how teenage fashion is all about expressing cultural identity. It brings all these abstract ideas to life.
It really does. You
Yeah.
can see how all these seemingly separate aspects of our lives are actually interconnected and influencing each other. And speaking of different contexts, the analysis also talks about how culture can lead to big differences in how people think, feel, and act around the world.
Right. And that's where those individualistic versus collectivist cultural frameworks we discussed earlier become super relevant. Different cultures have different default settings, so to speak, for how influence operates within their societies. The analysis even mentions Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory as a framework for understanding those cross-cultural differences.
So it's like culture provides a kind of blueprint for how influence works within a society.
You could say that. And entire fields like cultural psychology and cultural geography dedicate themselves to understanding how these cultural meanings, practices, and even geographical factors shape people.
Okay, so we've been talking about all these powerful forces that are constantly shaping us. It really makes you think about the ethics of influence, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The analysis touches on the distinction between persuasion and manipulation, which is a really important one for everyone to be aware of.
So what's the difference?
Well, persuasion is more about an open exchange of information. It relies on our ability to think critically and weigh different perspectives. But manipulation, that's more about using underhanded tactics to try to control or influence someone without their full knowledge or consent.
So, like, persuasion is playing fair, and manipulation is trying to trick you.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And the analysis also talks about the role of education in helping us develop autonomy and critical thinking skills so we can better distinguish between genuine information and attempts at manipulation. It also points out that social norms, while sometimes helpful, can also be coercive or even discriminatory.
It's about recognizing that even seemingly harmless social pressures can sometimes have negative consequences for individuals.
Exactly. And the analysis also offers some practical steps that we can take, both individually and as a society, to understand and shape the influences we encounter.
Oh, I'm interested in this. What can we do to be more aware and in control?
Well, on an individual level, it's all about honing those critical thinking skills and developing media literacy. That means learning to analyze information objectively and to spot manipulative tactics. Focusing on personal development, building resilience, and having strong social support networks can also help buffer against negative influences.
Those are great tips for taking charge of your own life. What about from a societal perspective? What can we do to create a more positive influence landscape?
The analysis suggests things like public health campaigns to promote positive behaviors, creating environments that support well-being, and investing in education to teach people about the different types of influence and how they work. It's about empowering people to make informed choices, not exploiting them.
It sounds like creating a society that values critical thinking and individual autonomy. And lastly, the analysis mentions all the different academic disciplines that are studying human influence. It's clearly a complex topic that draws in expertise from a wide range of fields.
It really does. We have psychology looking at individual processes, sociology examining social structures, anthropology exploring different cultures, neuroscience delving into the brain, philosophy pondering the ethics of influence, even communication studies focusing on persuasion and media effects. It's a truly interdisciplinary field.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today. As we wrap up this deep dive into the world of influence, what would you say is the key takeaway for all of us listening?
Well, the big takeaway is this. Our lives are constantly being shaped by this incredible complex mix of biological, social, cultural, environmental, and informational influences. And these forces are at play from the moment we are born until the very end of our lives.
It's amazing to think about how interconnected all of these things are, and I think the real power comes from understanding these influences. Right? If we know what's shaping us, we can be more conscious and intentional about the choices we make.
Absolutely. Awareness is the first step towards taking control. If we understand how influence works, we can start to make more informed decisions about who we want to be and how we want to live our lives.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I'm definitely going to be thinking about all these different influences in a new light. And with that in mind, here's a final thought for all of you listening to ponder. Considering the vast number of influences at play in your life, what single influence do you think has had the most profound impact on your own development, and why? It's a big question, but reflecting on it can lead to some really valuable insights.
I agree. Self-reflection is a powerful tool.
Thank you all for joining us on this journey into the fascinating world of human influence. We hope it's given you some food for thought and maybe even inspired you to take a closer look at the forces that are shaping your own life.
Thanks for having me. It's been a great discussion.
This is DigitView.